The morning began like any other. The sun had barely risen, casting soft golden light over the quiet roads. A truck rumbled along the highway, its engine steady, carrying both goods and the determination of the man behind the wheel. He had been driving trucks for years, crisscrossing states, delivering goods to towns and cities that often seemed far apart, yet somehow connected through his tires on the asphalt. He was a black man, tall and strong, with hands roughened by years of labor and a heart quietly kind. To those who knew him, he was dependable, honest, and someone who would help anyone if he could. This morning, like many others, he had loaded his rig with supplies bound for a small town several hours away. His route cut through countryside and stretches of open road, dotted with towns that looked asleep even at mid-morning. He liked these quiet moments, the hum of the truck's engine, the feel of the steering wheel beneath his palms, the radio playing soft music, or the occasional talk show in the background. Driving was lonely work, but he didn't mind. It gave him time to think, to watch the world pass by, and sometimes he even liked the silence. But as the day went on, he noticed something unusual. The sky, which had been clear and bright, started to change. Thick gray clouds rolled in, moving faster than they should, and a sharp wind began to whip across the fields. His truck rocked slightly with each gust, and he could see dust lifting from the open plains beside the road. He switched the radio to the local news station and caught the tail end of a warning about tornadoes in the area. A chill ran down his spine, but he remained calm. He had faced bad weather plenty of times before, and while storms could be dangerous, he knew that keeping a clear mind was more important than letting fear take over. He kept driving, alert to every sound and movement. The sky darkened further, turning from gray to a deep swirling charcoal. The wind grew stronger, tossing leaves and small branches across the road. Ahead, he could see trees bending under the force, and it wasn't long before he noticed a small town preparing for the storm. People were hurriedly boarding up windows, carrying items indoors, and guiding children and pets to safety. He slowed his rig, careful not to frighten anyone, and watched as the community braced for the worst. Even in the midst of this, he noticed something else, a car parked awkwardly on the side of the highway, its hazard lights blinking. There was a family inside, a mother, father, and a small child, their faces tense and worried. Beside them, a lone passenger sat calmly, observing the storm with quiet composure. Something about their situation made him instinctively stop. He didn't think twice. Driving trucks for years had taught him to be prepared for emergencies and to help when needed. Without hesitation, he parked his rig, cut the engine, and stepped out into the wind. The first gust nearly knocked him off balance, but he pressed on, reaching the car. "Hey, are you all okay?" he shouted over the roar of the wind. The mother's eyes widened with relief, and the father nodded quickly. The child clutched a small toy, looking frightened but trusting the stranger who had stopped. We don't know what to do," the father said. "The tornado warning came so fast we didn't have time to get anywhere safe." "Get in my truck," the driver said firmly but kindly. "I'll take you somewhere safer. Just hold on." It wasn't a question. It was a command shaped by experience and calm authority. The kind that comes from someone who has faced danger before and knows that hesitation can be deadly. One by one, the family climbed into the cab of the truck. The lone passenger followed last, his movements steady and measured. The driver helped them in, checking that everyone was strapped in, and then climbed back into the driver's seat himself. The truck roared to life, and he guided it back onto the highway. The wind buffeted the rig, rocking it from side to side, and the sky above twisted in strange patterns. Tornadoes were unpredictable, violent, and terrifying, but the driver focused on the road. He navigated carefully, choosing paths that avoided fallen branches and flooded areas. He spoke to the passengers, his voice calm and steady. "We're going to be okay. Just stay calm and trust me." Small conversations began, partly to reassure, partly to keep everyone's mind off the chaos outside. The mother clutched her child, whispering comforting words. The father kept glancing at the sky, concern etched on his face. The lone passenger remained quiet, only offering nods of acknowledgement. The driver noticed it, but he didn't pry. He had learned that in moments like this, people process fear differently. Some spoke to release it, some stayed silent to endure it. As they drove, the storm worsened. Tornado sirens wailed in the distance, warning towns further down the road. Debris flew across the highway, tree limbs, signs, pieces of roofing, and he swerved skillfully, keeping the truck upright. Every decision had to be precise. One wrong move could send the truck off the road or worse. The passengers clung to their seats, but the driver's confidence never wavered. He was a man who knew his limits and respected the power of nature, but he also knew he had to act. Hours seemed to pass in minutes. The tornado tore across the countryside, leaving destruction behind, but the truck pressed on, a symbol of hope and resilience. The driver made small jokes when he could, trying to lighten the tension. "Well, this isn't your average Tuesday, is it?" he said, and for a brief moment the passengers laughed nervously. It was a tiny spark of normalcy amid the chaos, a reminder that life continued even in the face of disaster. They encountered obstacles that tested every bit of the driver's skill. A fallen tree blocked the highway, but he didn't panic. He carefully reversed, found an alternate route, and guided the truck along a narrower side road. Flooded areas forced him to slow down, using the weight and stability of his vehicle to push through safely. Every move was calculated, every decision critical. The passengers began to sense that they were in capable hands, that this stranger behind the wheel was not just skilled, but deeply committed to keeping them safe. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the truck reached an area that seemed untouched by the tornado. Buildings stood intact, the wind had eased slightly, and emergency personnel were beginning to arrive. The driver guided the truck to a safe spot and helped the passengers out. They were shaken, exhausted, and grateful beyond words. The mother hugged her child tightly, tears streaming down her face. The father shook the driver's hand repeatedly, expressing thanks that words could hardly capture. The lone passenger, still calm but deeply appreciative, simply nodded and said, "You saved our lives today." "Thank you," the driver brushed off the praise. To him it wasn't heroism, it was what anyone should do if they could. He had done what was necessary, nothing more, nothing less. But inside there was a quiet satisfaction. He had kept people safe, and that mattered more than recognition. He glanced at the faces of those he had rescued, noticing their relief, their newfound respect, and something else he couldn't quite place, a sense of connection that went beyond words. As the sun began to set, painting the sky with soft shades of pink and orange, the driver climbed back into his truck. The storm was over, but the memory of its fury lingered. He started the engine, ready to continue his journey, knowing that life on the road would go on as it always did. Yet something had changed. That day, he realized, wasn't just about surviving a tornado. It was about the unexpected ways people come together in times of crisis. About courage, kindness, and the quiet strength of someone who chooses to act when it matters most. The lone passenger caught up with him just before he left. "By the way," he said, extending a hand, "I'm a U.S. Senator. I owe you my life." The driver laughed softly, shaking his head. "Doesn't matter who you are. I'm just glad everyone's okay." And with that, he waved, climbed back into his cab, and drove off into the fading light, unaware that this day, this storm, and these strangers would soon become a story told far beyond the highways he traveled. A story of bravery, of humanity, and of a man whose courage in the face of nature had changed lives in ways he would only later come to understand. The storm had passed, but the sky was still heavy with dark clouds. The wind had calmed, but its aftermath was clear everywhere the truck driver looked. Trees were uprooted, power lines lay across roads, and scattered debris marked the path of the tornado. The quiet that followed the chaos was almost eerie, broken only by the distant sound of emergency sirens and the occasional rumble of a frightened animal. The driver knew that the danger was far from over. The landscape was unpredictable, and getting people to complete safety would take both skill and care. The passengers in his truck were still shaken. The mother held her child tightly, trying to soothe them with soft whispers and gentle pats, while the father stared out the window, his hands clenched on his knees. The lone passenger remained calm, but there was an intensity in his eyes, a quiet alertness that made it clear he understood the seriousness of the situation. None of them spoke much, allowing the hum of the truck and the occasional radio update to fill the silence. The driver adjusted his mirrors and checked the load behind him, making sure nothing had shifted in the truck bed. He had faced storms before, but this one was unlike any he had experienced. The tornado had moved quickly and unpredictably, leaving destruction in its wake. Every road they took had to be carefully examined. One wrong turn could lead them into a blocked highway or unstable ground. He kept his focus sharp, scanning the road ahead and listening for the slightest indication of danger. As they drove, the passengers began to open up, sharing small details about their lives. The father mentioned work and family responsibilities, speaking quickly as if the words themselves could erase the fear he felt moments ago. The mother spoke softly about her child, the challenges of keeping them safe in a world that sometimes felt out of control. The child, shy and still trembling, held onto the toy that had been their comfort during the storm. The lone passenger remained quiet, observing and listening, but occasionally nodded in agreement or offered brief words of reassurance. The driver paid attention to every word, not because it mattered to him what they said, but because he understood the importance of connection in moments of fear. Talking helped people process what had happened, helped them feel less alone. He offered encouragement where he could, sometimes cracking a small joke to lighten the mood. "Well, at least the view is dramatic," he said, trying to ease tension. A few nervous laughs escaped from the passengers, and he allowed himself a small smile in return. Even in the face of disaster, he believed that human connection could be a lifeline. As they continued, the roads became more dangerous. The tornado had left behind fallen branches and scattered debris that made driving difficult. The driver slowed the truck to a careful crawl, navigating around obstacles and choosing paths that were safest for everyone. At one point, a large tree lay across the road, its trunk split in two by the storm. He stopped the truck, assessed the situation, and decided on a route around it, carefully guiding the rig along a narrow dirt side road. The passengers held their breath as the truck teetered slightly on uneven ground, but he remained calm, steadying the wheel with expert hands. Hours passed in tense silence. The sun was hidden behind the clouds, casting a gray light over the devastated landscape. Patches of rain fell intermittently, adding to the challenge. The driver kept his focus, speaking only when necessary. "Stay close and hold on," he said quietly. "We're going to make it through this." His voice was calm, measured, filled with a quiet confidence that reassured the passengers even as the storm's aftermath threatened to overwhelm them. At one point, they came across another family stranded on a bridge that had partially collapsed. Without hesitation, the driver stopped and offered assistance, helping them into the truck bed where there was space. The mother tried to protest, saying they should wait for emergency crews, but he shook his head. "We don't have time to wait," he said. "It's not safe here. I can get you out." One by one, they climbed into the truck under his guidance, clinging to the sides and trusting him to navigate through the unstable terrain. The lone passenger, still calm and observant, finally spoke. "You've got nerves of steel," he said. "Most people wouldn't risk it like this." The driver shrugged, not wanting to make a big deal out of it. "I just do what I can," he replied. "No one deserves to be left behind." The words were simple, but the meaning was clear. He valued human life above everything else. The storm's aftermath created constant challenges. Flooded areas forced the driver to calculate depth and stability before crossing. Fallen wires blocked potential routes, requiring him to find alternate paths. Each decision carried weight. Each maneuver demanded full attention. Yet through it all, he remained composed, methodically guiding the truck with precision. The passengers began to sense a rhythm in his movements, a quiet trust developing in the space of shared danger. As the day wore on, exhaustion began to set in. The passengers were drained from fear and stress, and the driver himself felt the strain in his shoulders and back. Still, he pressed on, understanding that stopping too soon could put everyone at risk. They passed abandoned vehicles, shattered homes, and debris-strewn roads, each scene a reminder of the tornado's power. It was a humbling sight, one that made the passengers quiet, reflecting on the fragility of life and the suddenness with which circumstances could change. During one particularly difficult stretch, the truck encountered a narrow bridge with debris partially covering it. The driver carefully guided the rig onto the bridge, moving slowly to maintain balance. The passengers clutched the sides, gripping their seats tightly as the truck creaked and shifted over unstable ground. A brief slip could have sent the vehicle tumbling, but the driver's experience and calm nerves carried them safely across. Once they were on solid ground, a collective sigh of relief filled the cab. The passengers exchanged glances, a shared understanding forming between them. Through all of this, the driver kept an eye on the lone passenger, whose calm demeanor was both reassuring and mysterious. He hadn't asked who this person was, and it hadn't seemed important. In moments like these, titles and positions didn't matter. What mattered was survival, courage, and human kindness. And yet there was something in the way the passenger observed the storm, in the quiet confidence in his posture, that hinted at experience and authority. The driver didn't think much of it, focusing instead on the immediate task, getting everyone safely to a secure location. Eventually, as they approached a slightly elevated area away from the worst damage, the driver could see signs of safety. Emergency vehicles were stationed nearby, tents set up for displaced people and volunteers helping residents navigate the aftermath. He guided the truck carefully through the debris and parked near a volunteer station. The passengers looked around, relief washing over their faces. For the first time since the storm began, they allowed themselves to relax. The mother hugged her child tightly, whispering words of comfort. The father thanked the driver repeatedly, his voice tinged with exhaustion and gratitude. Even the lone passenger, still composed, offered a nod and a quiet, "Thank you." The driver waved them off. "You're safe now. That's all that matters." His words were simple, but they carried weight, encapsulating the quiet heroism that had defined his actions throughout the storm. As they stepped out of the truck, the passengers noticed the damage around them. Homes had been torn apart, trees uprooted and roads blocked. The driver took a moment to look back at the path they had traveled, a sense of quiet pride filling him. He had guided people through danger, kept them safe, and in doing so made a difference in lives he would never forget. The lone passenger finally spoke again. "I've seen a lot in my life, but not many people act with such calm and courage in the face of danger. You did more than drive a truck, you saved lives today." The driver shrugged, still modest. "I just did what anyone should do. People look out for each other. That's all." But inside, he felt the quiet satisfaction of knowing he had made the right choice, of having faced fear head-on and helped others survive. By the time night fell, the truck driver had returned to his vehicle, ready to continue his journey. The storm was over, but its impact lingered in the form of damaged roads and displaced families. Yet in the midst of destruction, there was hope. The people he had rescued were safe, and the small acts of courage and kindness had made a difference. He started the engine and drove slowly through the night, the headlights cutting through the darkness, aware of the fragile balance between danger and safety, life and loss. And while he drove, he remained unaware that among the passengers he had rescued was someone whose life and position could bring unexpected recognition. At that moment, it didn't matter. What mattered was the simple truth he had lived by all his life. In the face of danger, do what you can to help others and trust that courage and kindness will always have meaning. Even when the world feels chaotic and uncertain, the road ahead was uncertain. The storm had passed, but the tornado had left its mark in ways that were hard to see from a distance. Fallen trees blocked narrow roads, electrical wires hung dangerously low, and debris littered the paths like jagged reminders of the chaos that had swept through the countryside. The truck driver adjusted his mirrors and tightened his grip on the wheel. He had to remain fully alert. One wrong move, and the safety of the passengers he had brought along could vanish in an instant. Inside the truck, the passengers were quiet, each lost in their thoughts. The mother held her child close, trying to soothe them even as the little one's wide eyes reflected lingering fear. The father's jaw was tight. He kept scanning the landscape for hazards, perhaps imagining dangers that no longer existed. The lone passenger remained calm, observing everything with measured attention, but the intensity in his gaze suggested he was acutely aware of the risks. None of them spoke much, but the tension between words unsaid and survival instincts filled the cab in a silent, heavy way. The driver broke the quiet with a few practical instructions. "Keep your seatbelts fastened. If anything hits the truck, I need you all secure. Hold on, and we'll get through this." His tone was firm but reassuring, carrying the authority of someone accustomed to responsibility in moments of danger. There was no panic in his voice, only steady confidence, and that steadiness gave the passengers something they hadn't felt since the tornado had begun: hope. As they drove, the path became more treacherous. A stretch of road was flooded from recent heavy rain, and debris floated in the shallow water like hidden obstacles. The driver slowed, navigating carefully, testing the depth with each inch the tires rolled forward. The truck groaned under the strain, but it held steady. Each movement was deliberate. Each decision weighed against potential danger. "Almost there," he said quietly. "Just a little farther and we'll be safe." The mother gripped her child tightly, whispering, We're going to be okay?" The father nodded, though his knuckles were white as he clutched the seat. The child, sensing reassurance from both parents and the driver, held onto a small stuffed toy as though it could protect them from everything outside. The lone passenger, calm and composed, finally spoke. "You're incredible. I don't know how you keep your cool like this." The driver shook his head slightly. "I just focus on what I can control," he said. "Panicking won't help anyone." Hours seemed to stretch into eternity. The tornado's path of destruction made every mile a challenge. Fallen trees forced the truck to take detours, sometimes over narrow dirt roads barely wide enough for the rig. The driver guided the truck with precision, maneuvering around obstacles and ensuring the passengers remained secure. Each turn of the wheel, each careful navigation of the truck was a test of skill and nerves. He had done this before in smaller storms, but this was the first time he had been responsible for the lives of multiple strangers in such extreme conditions. At one point, the truck came to a narrow bridge partially blocked by fallen beams and debris. The driver stopped and examined it carefully. The bridge looked weak, but there was no other route. He took a deep breath, shifting gears, and slowly drove onto the bridge. The passengers held their breath as the rig creaked under its weight. Small pieces of debris scraped the truck's sides, but he remained steady, moving inch by inch until the far side was reached safely. A collective sigh of relief escaped the cab. No one spoke immediately, allowing the weight of the moment to sink in. The driver continued through the storm's aftermath, aware of every hazard. Flooded sections forced him to judge depth with careful attention, gauging where the truck could safely pass. Electrical wires hung low over some roads, threatening to catch the rig if misjudged. Fallen trees and scattered branches created an obstacle course that would have overwhelmed anyone unprepared. But he remained calm, focused on his mission, to get everyone to safety. His movements were methodical, almost instinctive, a combination of experience and instinct honed through years of long hours behind the wheel. Inside the truck, the passengers began to open up more. The mother spoke softly, recounting small moments of fear and gratitude. "I can't believe we made it this far," she said, tears glistening in her eyes. The father nodded, adding, "I don't know how to thank you enough. You saved our lives." The driver waved them off, shrugging modestly. "You're safe now. That's all that matters," he replied. He was humble, not seeking recognition. Saving lives wasn't about glory. It was about responsibility. The lone passenger finally broke his silence further. "Not many people would take the risks you have," he said quietly, eyes fixed on the road ahead. "You're braver than most." The driver shook his head. "I'm not brave," he said. "I just do what needs to be done. When you see people in danger, you help them. That's it." His words were simple, but the passengers felt their truth. Bravery, he understood, wasn't about heroics. It was about doing the right thing when no one else could. They drove on, navigating more flooded roads and sections where the tornado's force had gouged the earth. The truck tires splashed through water, sending up waves that soaked the lower windows. Fallen trees forced detours along narrow paths lined with mud and rocks. Every mile tested endurance and focus, but the driver's calm demeanor kept the passengers from succumbing to panic. He spoke occasionally, offering small reassurances and reminders. "We're almost there. Stay with me. Just a little farther." The storm's destruction was everywhere. Homes were damaged or destroyed, cars overturned or abandoned, and entire fields were flattened. The passengers couldn't help but glance at the devastation, a mixture of awe and horror reflected in their expressions. The driver noticed their reactions but didn't comment. He had seen destruction before, but what mattered now was survival, not despair. Each life in his truck was a small victory against the chaos surrounding them. As the day wore on, the truck approached a larger, clearer road. Emergency vehicles were visible in the distance, volunteers assisting residents and directing traffic around dangerous areas. The driver guided the truck carefully onto the road, signaling to passers-by and navigating around debris. Relief filled the cab, but he remained focused, knowing that any misstep could still cause harm. He kept checking mirrors, scanning for obstacles, and maintaining a careful pace. Finally, after what felt like endless hours, the truck reached a temporary shelter area. Volunteers waved them toward a safe parking spot, guiding them past damaged vehicles and flooded sections. The passengers began to relax, their bodies releasing tension that had been held tight for hours. The mother hugged her child tightly, whispering calming words. The father exhaled, leaning against the seat for a moment before stepping out. The lone passenger offered a nod, his calm presence now mixed with quiet appreciation. The driver parked, helping the passengers out of the truck and ensuring they were safe. The mother and father expressed their gratitude repeatedly, their voices full of emotion. Even the child, previously silent and fearful, smiled faintly, holding onto the toy that had been their comfort. The lone passenger approached the driver, shaking his hand firmly. "You've done something remarkable," he said. "Most people wouldn't have the courage to act as you did." The driver shook his head again, modestly. "I just did what anyone would do if they could. People look out for each other. That's it." But inside he felt a quiet satisfaction. He had navigated through the chaos, kept people safe, and proven to himself that courage was not always loud or public. Sometimes it was quiet, steady, and committed to the well-being of others. As the passengers were guided toward shelter, the driver returned to his truck, preparing to continue his journey. The storm had left scars on the land, but it had also revealed something powerful: the strength of human kindness and the quiet heroism of those who act without expectation of reward. Driving away from the shelter, he felt a sense of purpose that had deepened with every mile, every decision, and every life he had helped protect. And though he didn't know it at the time, the calm and composed passenger he had rescued was someone whose life and influence could one day bring him recognition far beyond the roads he traveled. For now, what mattered was simple. Everyone was alive, everyone was safe, and in the quiet of the truck cab, the driver allowed himself a small moment of satisfaction. He had faced chaos and danger and emerged with his humanity intact, his focus unbroken, and his sense of duty fulfilled. The truck came to a slow stop at the edge of a temporary shelter area, where volunteers moved quickly to guide people to safety. The wind had finally calmed, leaving behind an eerie quiet broken only by the distant hum of emergency vehicles and the soft chatter of people helping each other. The driver turned off the engine and exhaled, a small but deep breath that seemed to release hours of tension. He glanced at the passengers, seeing relief etched across their faces, mixed with lingering exhaustion. They were safe, and for the first time in hours they could allow themselves to truly relax. The mother clutched her child tightly, smoothing the little one's hair and whispering words of comfort. The child looked up occasionally, eyes wide but beginning to lose the fear that had dominated the day. The father exhaled slowly, leaning on the truck for a moment before finally stepping out, his legs stiff and tired but grateful to be on solid ground. Even the lone passenger, who had remained calm throughout the ordeal, allowed a small smile to appear. He approached the driver, a look of quiet appreciation in his eyes. "You kept everyone safe," he said. "That takes more than skill, it takes courage and focus." The driver shook his head modestly, brushing off the praise. "I just did what I had to do. People look out for each other when they can. That's all." But the words didn't diminish the truth of what he had accomplished. In a single day, he had navigated through chaos, danger, and fear, guiding strangers to safety when it mattered most. Volunteers began assisting the passengers, offering blankets, water, and guidance to temporary shelters set up in nearby tents and community centers. The driver helped them down from the truck, making sure each person was steady on their feet. The mother thanked him repeatedly, her voice filled with tears and relief. The father clasped his hands, muttering words of gratitude. Even the child, still small and trembling, hugged the driver's arm for a brief moment, a gesture of trust and appreciation that spoke louder than any words could. The driver felt a quiet pride, but he didn't linger on it. He knew his job wasn't finished. There were still people in need, roads to navigate, and lives to keep safe. He checked the truck one more time, ensuring it was in good condition to continue. The cab, which had carried so much tension and fear, now seemed almost peaceful. He could feel the weight of exhaustion settling into his shoulders, but it was tempered by a profound sense of fulfillment. Around the shelter, the destruction left by the tornado was clear. Homes had been damaged, trees uprooted, and debris scattered across streets. Emergency personnel were working tirelessly to clear paths and check on residents who had been stranded during the storm. The passengers, now guided to safety, were speaking with volunteers, sharing their experiences and expressing gratitude for the help they had received. The driver watched them, feeling a deep sense of connection. These moments, small yet significant, reminded him why he continued to face challenges on the road, why helping others was always worth the risk. The lone passenger, standing slightly apart from the others, finally spoke again. "You didn't know it at the time, but one of the people you helped was in a position of influence," he said quietly. The driver looked up, raising an eyebrow. "Doesn't matter," he replied simply. "Everyone's life is important, not just the people in power." The passenger nodded, a look of respect in his eyes. "True," he said. "But people should know what you did. It's extraordinary." For a moment, the driver allowed himself to consider the idea of recognition, but it quickly passed. He wasn't driven by fame or praise. His motivation had always been simple: to do what was right, to help when he could, and to trust that small acts of courage and kindness mattered. That belief had guided him through storms, both literal and metaphorical, and it continued to shape his actions. Volunteers were organizing the shelter area, directing people to available spaces and providing food and water. The passengers were being offered blankets, hot drinks, and comfort after hours of fear and uncertainty. The driver stayed nearby, ensuring they were settled and safe before finally taking a moment for himself. He leaned against the truck, allowing the cool evening air to wash over him. The sky, once dark and threatening, now revealed streaks of fading light, a reminder that even after chaos, calm could return. He thought about the path they had traveled, the dangers faced and the lives he had touched. The tornado had left destruction, yes, but it had also revealed the strength of human resilience, the courage of ordinary people in extraordinary circumstances, and the quiet power of someone willing to act when others might hesitate. In those moments, he realized that bravery wasn't always loud or visible. Sometimes it was quiet, steady, and committed to helping others, even when no one was watching. The mother approached him again, holding her child. "Thank you," she said softly. "I don't know what we would have done without you." The driver smiled gently. "You're safe now. That's all that matters." The father joined in, shaking the driver's hand. "You saved our lives," he said. "I don't know how to repay you." The driver simply shook his head. "No repayment needed. Just take care of each other." The lone passenger, still composed, watched silently for a moment before stepping forward. "I've seen a lot of people in positions of responsibility," he said, "but very few act with the courage and calm you've shown today. What you did goes beyond helping strangers. It's an example of what humanity can be at its best." The driver shrugged modestly. "I just did what anyone would do if they could. People deserve help. That's it." As the evening deepened, the shelter area began to fill with more people who had been affected by the tornado. Volunteers worked tirelessly to provide food, blankets, and comfort. The passengers, now safe, were sharing their story with others, explaining how a truck driver had guided them through danger and ensured their survival. The driver listened quietly, allowing others to express gratitude and admiration, but he remained humble. Recognition was not what drove him. Seeing lives saved, knowing people were safe, that was reward enough. Night fell, and the chaos of the day slowly gave way to a quiet sense of relief. Emergency lights flashed in the distance, volunteers moved methodically through the shelter, and people found spaces to rest after hours of fear and uncertainty. The driver, still at the edge of the shelter, looked out over the scene. He could see the destruction, yes, but also the resilience and determination of people working together. It was a reminder that even in the face of nature's fury, humanity could endure, adapt, and care for one another. The lone passenger approached once more. "Before I go," he said quietly, "I want you to know who I am. I'm a U.S. Senator. Today you didn't just save ordinary citizens, you saved someone who serves the country. I owe you my life." The driver's eyes widened slightly, but he only shook his head. "Doesn't matter who I helped," he replied. "Every life is important. Today was about people surviving, not titles or positions." The senator nodded, clearly impressed by the driver's humility. "Most people would have hesitated," he said. "But you acted immediately, calmly, and bravely. That's something few can do." The driver smiled softly. "I just did what I had to do," he said. "I hope everyone can get the help they need now." As the passengers moved toward temporary lodging, the driver returned to his truck. He checked the engine, made sure the vehicle was in good condition, and prepared to continue his journey. The storm had left scars on the land, but it had also revealed moments of courage, human connection, and the quiet heroism that often goes unnoticed. For him, the day was a reminder that doing what's right, even in the most difficult circumstances, carries its own reward. He climbed into the driver's seat, settled into the familiar rhythm of the truck, and started the engine. The road ahead was long, the night dark, but the sense of purpose in his heart was strong. He had faced fear, guided others through danger, and emerged with the quiet knowledge that he had made a difference. The passengers were safe, volunteers were helping the rest, and the community was beginning the process of recovery. And though recognition had begun to find him through the grateful words of the senator and the people he had rescued, he remained humble. What mattered was not fame or acknowledgement. It was the simple act of saving lives, of being there when it counted, and of demonstrating that courage and kindness, no matter how quiet, could change the course of a day, and even a life. As he drove away into the night, headlights cutting through the darkness, the storm's memory lingered, but so did the knowledge that human compassion and bravery could shine brightest in the darkest hours. He thought about the people in his truck, about the little child holding a toy, about the mother and father who had trusted him with their lives, and about the senator whose presence had been unknown to him until now. In all of them, he saw the proof that one person's action, even when unnoticed, could ripple outward, affecting lives in ways no one could fully measure. The road stretched ahead, quiet and empty. The driver felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that he had done everything he could to help. The world might not always notice, but he did not need it to. Today had been about courage, care, and the simple truth that when people act with humanity, even the most destructive storm can leave behind lessons of hope, strength, and resilience. The night was calm now, the storm long gone, leaving behind a quiet stillness that felt almost unreal after the chaos of the day. The truck driver sat behind the wheel, the engine humming softly as he considered everything that had happened. The road stretched before him, dark and empty, but illuminated by the occasional streetlight or the beams of his headlights. His mind replayed the events of the day, the sudden arrival of the tornado, the fear in the eyes of the passengers, the obstacles they had faced, and the decisions he had made in moments of extreme pressure. Though exhaustion weighed heavily on his body, his spirit was lifted by the knowledge that he had kept people safe. He thought about the mother and her child, the father who had clutched the seat in terror, and the lone passenger whose calm demeanor had both comforted and intrigued him. Each person had relied entirely on him, trusting his skills, judgment, and courage in a moment when the world outside seemed to have lost all sense of order. That trust was humbling and, in its own quiet way, profoundly rewarding. As he drove, he reflected on what it meant to act without expectation of reward. Today he had faced danger and fear, but he had done so because it was the right thing to do. Bravery, he realized, was not always about headlines or recognition. Sometimes it was about quiet decisions, small acts of courage, and the willingness to step forward when others hesitated. He had done all of that today, and while the world might not yet know his name, he understood that the lives he had helped save were proof enough of his impact. The passengers had now been taken to temporary shelter, where volunteers offered food, water, blankets, and a place to rest. The mother held her child close, comforting them and explaining that everything was going to be okay. The father, still exhausted, spoke quietly with volunteers, recounting the events of the day with gratitude and awe. And the lone passenger, finally stepping aside to speak with officials, revealed his position as a U.S. Senator. The driver hadn't known during the rescue who he was, and that fact, he thought, made the actions even more meaningful. Recognition was secondary. Human life was the true priority. News began to spread about the tornado and the people it had affected. Local media outlets reported on the storm's damage, the